Hello everyone, this is News Review. My name is Lamin Jai. So coming up today, a top security analyst is calling on President Adama Barrow to expedite the security sector reform in order for citizens to regain control of national security. And also, Dr. Ismaila Ceesay today is my guest, and we will be talking about the state of our politics. But before all of this, let's start with the papers. I have The Point and also Foroyaa. Foroyaa today, lead story is saying PDIS launch Gonga, set to enlighten Gambians. Also, farmers dilate on harvest season. Gardeners call for intervention. Also, GPU validates handbook for journalists on budget public finance reporting. We will quickly go through the stories there. The People's Democratic Organization for Independence and Socialism, PDIS, have on Sunday, 10th November 2019, launched their party magazine, Gonga, set to enlighten Gambians. Gonga, a fuller word meaning the truth, is the magazine of Doi, which was launched in the midst of the party's call for system change. Also on Foroyaa today, GPU validates handbook for journalists on budget public finance reporting. Journalists from across all media platforms, together with representatives from the Minister of Finance and the Central Bank of the Gambia, on Saturday, 2nd November 2019, validated the draft handbook for journalists on budget and public finance reporting. That will be all for the Foroyaa. And now The Point is also today saying fertilizer scandal. Police return the return file to AG Chamber. SGWF signs $50 million financial deal with Reliance. Magazi renews support to Barrow, calls 3 years Jotna movement rebels. Remembrance Day 2019 observed. So the lead story there is saying Ibrahim Asilla, the Minister of Information, Communication and Communication Infrastructure, has revealed that the police have sent back the investigation file concerning the fertilizer scandal that gripped the Minister of Agriculture to the Attorney General Chamber for proper advice. Also, Reliance Financial Services last Thursday signed a $50 million loan fund with Senegalo-Gambian Women Federation at the Federation's headquarters in Carnifing. Also, Honorable Mohamed Magazi, the National Assembly member for Basse constituency, has over the weekend renewed his support for President Barrow. That's President Adam Barrow, saying he was going to support the 5 years presidency mandate of Mr. Barrow as stated in the Constitution. He, however, described those who are planning to end the president's mandate in December as rebels. So that will be all for the papers. We will be right back.
For the first time in the Gambia, your favorite GSM operator, Africell, is the first and only GSM operator to launch a brand new technology called the eSIM. The eSIM simply means you can use your phone without a SIM card. Do you have an iPhone 11, any of the iPhone X series, a Google Pixel 3, or any new phone that supports the e-technology? Visit any Africell customer care center. Activate your eSIM today. With your virtual Africell SIM, you can use more than one number without having a physical SIM card in your phone. Enjoy this brand new technology for the first time in the Gambia, brought to you by Africell. eSIM, your phone without a SIM card. For more information, please call 111. Where Africell goes, nobody dares to follow. Dares to follow.
So now I am joined by Dr. Ismaila Ceesay, top political scientist. He is the head of the political science department at the University of the Gambia. Dr. Ceesay, welcome.
Thank you, Lamin.
Doc, first, there is a lot of noise. The politics of the country, a lot of noise everywhere, politicians everywhere, in trying to gain control of the future of the country. What do you make of this whole issue of having politicians everywhere scrambling for the country's, future?
Yes, thank you. A lot of noise. I like that adjective. Obviously, there should be noise. Is it bad noise? That is the question, whether it's good or bad noise. But noise is needed. Thinking of the fact that what we came from, there was very little noise. Noise was coming only from one end. and now noise has been democratized. Before, noise was monopolized. But now noise is democratized, so obviously there's a lot of things going on. That's why we live in very interesting times insofar as our politics is concerned. And I think let us not just, even though there are some negatives, the vitriolic attacks, the casting of aspersions, the insults, but there are some positives as well in this noise. It shows that now Gambia is truly a democratic country where people are free to speak their mind. And people can engage in politics to discuss the trajectory of their country without being intimidated, without thinking they will be picked up at night and taken to another location. So I think overall it's okay. Now, the noise, like you said, political parties scrambling for votes, yes, of course. Take this mandate as a football game, a 90-minute game. The first half is over. We're in the halftime now. The second half starts proper in December or January. Now we have the last 45 minutes up to the elections. Therefore, parties know that elections is just around the corner. And time flies, so they have to start mobilizing support, grassroots support. They have to make sure that they keep the momentum because no political party wants the momentum to die. So they're keeping the momentum. A lot of things are going on, a lot of debates are going on. Coupled with, and also you have to understand that the Pandora's box was opened in December 2016. A lot of things started to happen at the same time, unexpectedly, because most people didn't really expect the change that occurred in 2016. So a lot of things happen at the same time. A lot of processes are going on, like I said, the CRC, the TRRC, security sector reform, and so on and so forth. We have political parties, a coalition which is in tatters, every one of them trying to entrench, control, trying to keep the momentum. So obviously there'll be a lot of noise with the 3 or 5 year thing going on. So obviously it's a lot of noise. But is it good noise? Is it bad noise? That's left for others to discuss.
Quite sapping there, energy-wise. It's very energy sapping. You have all these politicians, all these political players scrambling for only one thing. That's popularity. But then it's also a very nascent democracy. This started just in 2016. And now we have seen how political parties in the country have been trying to gain, popularity, have been trying to put up a fight. So let me ask you this then, because this all started with a coalition, strange political party bedfellows coming together to wrest power, wrest Jammeh out of power. And what we have seen is that at some point they've begun to go their separate ways. Was this always bound to happen, or does it have to do with certain factors that led to this, the coalition disintegrating with each of the parties going their separate ways?
Well, those of us who are keen observers of African politics in general said this just after the elections, before the coalition under this office, that this coalition is bound to disintegrate very soon. Because, I mean, it happened everywhere in Kenya and other countries, that coalitions of this nature that came together out of a specific necessity. Like I said at the time, the circumstances were extraordinary. Therefore, extraordinary decisions had to be made. And luckily, the coalition members felt at that time also, they also knew there were extraordinary times. Something has to be done to save this country. They came together without even having a long-term plan for what would it be like if we get into power. I think the plan mostly was short-term, is how to remove Jammeh from power. Because I could still vividly remember debates at that time when I used to debate people on this issue. That what happens after Jammeh? And most of the answer will be, let's just remove him first and we'll discuss that. And obviously you'll know that the coalition was not thinking ahead as to what that is why if you look, it took them, how long does it take them to even come up with a government, a cabinet? It took them a while because they are not prepared, they are not thinking that far. Yes, like you said, the coalition has disintegrated. This was expected, obviously. What brought them together was not a common
point of view.
A common point of view was there, but not a common agenda in terms of a common national agenda in terms of taking the country to a particular place. The agenda was to remove Jammeh from power. So when that was achieved, obviously, naturally, it was bound to disintegrate. That is why I wasn't shocked that, even some will be shocked, that immediately after when the elections was lost and won, The coalition never met to say, we've achieved the first milestone, removing Jammeh from power. What next? What is the way forward? What is the roadmap? They did not. Until recently, when the 3 or 5 year thing began to surface and start, that's when they met. But they never met. And we expect they should meet at least after elections to evaluate. Well, we've done the unthinkable. What next? What's the roadmap? How do we sail through the transition? What are the likely challenges we'll face? What do we do? And that never happened. So obviously, it was...
And one man who was at the heart of this entire political, you know, if you like, life was President Adama Barrow, who in fact was the one who was chosen to be the flag bearer and then the candidate, and then he went on to win the elections. He was always at the heart, at the forefront of this entire change. But what we have seen is one would have expected him to ensure that the coalition is kept intact, because here was a man who projected a very, you know, hopeful future at the time. At the time he was being chosen to be election, very someone who was described as sincere and honest. But what we have seen is that he has gone ahead to himself be at the center of events in terms of the disintegration of the coalition. What went wrong on his side? Let's start from there before we get to the other
I
stakeholders.
think on his side, here was a man, you said, who was at the center, who was a key player in the coalition. But here also was a man who, until he was elected as a coalition leader, wouldn't know what a coalition is, obviously. So he had people around him. It was Farmada Tambajan who was chair of the coalition. We had Halifa Saleh. That is why Adama Barrow made it very clear from the beginning that I don't know anything. I rely on these people behind me. So obviously, Adama Barrow reacted to the situation. He reacted to the opportunities that were created by this situation thanks to the coalition partners. He saw that even though we had binding agreements based on the contracts, but it seems like even the people who are supposed to make sure that are even divided. And we saw that from the beginning. So they are not even focusing on him. That is why a few things happened, and these were red flags. One, when Maifati was sacked by the president, according to the coalition MOU, this should be done in consultation with the coalition executive committee. But Barrow did not do that. So when he sacked Maifati, the coalition would have said, look, you know what, emergency meeting. One key cardinal rule of the coalition MOU has been violated by President Barrow. President Barrow, get your acts together. We cannot allow it. And he'll know, okay, now I'm being watched. Now, you know, but he sacked Maifati, he got away with it. He sacked OJ, he got away with it. So obviously he'll say that then...
But then before that, what we have seen is the composition of the cabinet, him going ahead to appoint ministers. But what much is known is that that was done, he did that without consulting any coalition stakeholders.
Exactly, so we can say that's why it started. Because had it been that the coalition chairperson, all the other coalition members were like, you know what, we are going to meet, this is our roadmap. Immediately after the elections, they met and a clear roadmap. Everybody will know that now we are serious. This is serious business. Let's keep to the coalition agenda. The coalition agenda was attractive. But once the election ended and everybody went their own ways, everybody started doing their own thing, obviously it gave Adama Barrow the opportunity to also entrench himself.
And also one thing what happened is when President Barrow was coming, he came as a very, like I said, as a very sincere man earlier. I believed him when he said he was going to serve for 3 years. And I'm sure a lot of people out there believed him. But now we have seen him coming out and saying, hey, look, I am doing 5 years, whether one likes it or not.
Yeah.
So what really went wrong? What is the problem?
Well, I think obviously anybody who is, again, a keen observer of African politics it's that. And when politicians come, they make promises. Then he didn't know the sweetness of power, perhaps.
Does it have to do with the sweetness of power, or does it have to do with the reasons that he's been advancing the issue of projects?
No, what projects?
The projects that he's rolled out?
I'll tell you something. Those projects, see, projects in a country never ends. No one leader can end this project. Then no president will go, because projects are a continuous enterprise. What I'm saying is that it's the sweetness of power, nothing else. Because when he came to power, he realized, wow, this is the privileges, and all this protocols and all this stuff. But also, I'll tell you, so there are other factors which also played. People around him, they knew that our only chance of making it, the privileges when Barrow is in power. If he goes, then our privileges are gone. So they'll be putting pressure on him. And also other interests, so obviously it's not only him alone. There are also other forces around him who are also playing a key role in convincing him that, you know, you have to stay. Not even stay for these 5 years, but there is even a chance for you to sit again, because one, you have the incumbency advantage, and there is no reason why you cannot win the next election. So obviously it's not only him, you see. So if it was only him, well, but there are also other forces around that also play a key role in influencing the president's decision whether he should step down after 3 years or whether he should go for 5 years. And obviously those forces are so powerful that President Barrow doesn't have what it takes to resist those forces.
And now let's talk about one of the key players, key stakeholders, holder members, UDP. This is the party that, of course, made President Barrow from a political nobody to a political somebody. But what we have also seen, when they got to power, UDP was President Barrow's biggest backers. They stood by him through thick and thin. A lot of people were criticizing him, but UDP was on his side. And all of a sudden, they fall out. I mean, a very bitter fallout.
Yes.
What do you make of that? Was that something that you saw coming, or you were caught by surprise?
Nothing surprises me in politics. Fortunately or unfortunately, nothing surprises me in politics. Obviously, we've seen it elsewhere happening. Political allies going their own ways, because everything is interest. Politics mostly is interest. Where there is an interest of a convergence of interest, we'll come together. Where our interest starts to diverge, we go our separate ways.
But Dr. Cisse, this marriage was so strong to the extent that the leader of the UDP came out threatening to take or drag anybody to court, anybody who advocates or tries to ask President Barrow to step down at the end of the 3-year
that is not unusual. At that time, like you said, the relationship was good. If you are my friend, you will swear to anybody that if you touch Dr. Cisse, I'll kill you. Once we part ways, you'll go and even try to come and kill me. So obviously, this is natural. At that time, like you said, the marriage was on, the honeymoon was on, everything was going fine. So obviously, we expect UDP, Dabo, or even Barrow to say certain things to make sure that they oil that machine that keeps the relationship together. And obviously, we saw at some point there was a divergence of interest between the two leaders. And obviously, naturally, what would that lead to? And they lead to irreconcilable differences. I mean, even people who get married for 50 years, there are instances where there are irreconcilable differences and they divorce. Sometimes the divorce is bitter. Sometimes the divorce is based on rancor. Sometimes they divorce peaceful and they are friends. So this is normal. This is not unique to Gambia. It's not the first time we are going to see this in Gambian politics. It is not the first time. In fact, it has happened in Gambian politics. It is not the first time. It will happen, or the last time. But also, we've also seen in other countries whereby you start political allies, they fall out. Sometimes they come back. Sometimes they are bitter enemies. So these things happen. I think for us, it's not about those things. Those things happen. It's about the implications. What are the implications? How does it fare for our democracy? Those are the things that we should be focusing on. Not those things are bound to happen. You don't expect relationships to endure eternity. Sometimes they break. Everything is interest. What brings you and somebody to come as a partner is because there's a convergence of interest. When that interest is no more there, you both go your ways.
So now, Doc, when President Barrow took over power, you were among the first people who interrogated him, who came out and reviewed him. Even if that review was not favorable, you described him as clueless. And that was something that generated a lot of noise. Do you still maintain that position, that view?
That he is clueless?
Yes.
Well, you want to put words into my mouth. My view on the way the president is running this country has not changed, because I haven't seen anything that has changed so far. I'm still seeing the same amateurish way of running the affairs of the country. So now whether you'd use that adjective clueless or not clueless, that's one thing. But I know that my view hasn't really changed so far because I've seen.
But here is a president who insists that he's the deal
for this country. For this country. Well, that's his opinion. Everybody has a right to their own opinion. That's how he sees it. And in fact, there are people around him, supporters. I just read the newspapers and I saw some elders go to him, calling him the best visionary leader. Yes, obviously, that's their opinion. But that's not everybody's opinion. Obviously, in all of, even though you are the worst wrestler, you go and say, man mako yor, feka yorulo ko tojulo fen. But again, what I'm trying to say is that the country is not being governed the way it should be governed, considering the circumstances, considering difficulties that we are coming from, and the thing that needs to be done. And we wouldn't know this until at the end of the 90 minutes. We'll reflect and realize that indeed, not much has been done, not much has
How could
changed.
President Barrow have done it differently?
I think what he could have done is to focus on the coalition agenda and try to do everything to keep the coalition intact. In the sense that the coalition agenda was attractive, in the sense that it was going to restart the Gambia, not only the Gambian economy, but to restart the Gambia as a country. Take it as a car that has been parked for many decades without moving. The task is for you to start moving the car. The first thing you do is to make sure you jump so the car starts, the engine starts. And what is that is the reforms that were supposed to be done. And they know it, that is why it was on the coalition agenda, the media reforms, the constitutional reform, the civil service reform, security sector reform. These were the things that Barrow could have focused on. Now, every leader, your objective determines who you bring around you. Now, you look for people who are going to help you achieve these reforms, and then you bring those people around you in terms of fighting corruption, the financial mismanagement, to make sure that our money doesn't, we have control of our money and our economy. So he should have focused on those things and then not too much focused on entrenching himself. I think he started eyeing the beyond 2021 too early and focusing on the most important and the most basic things to do, that is the reforms. I think he should have focused on the reforms. He should have focused on the coalition agenda, which was attractive, which, had he successfully implemented that, he wouldn't even call for a second term. People have said, you know what, you did quite a very good job. Why don't you consider going for a second? You get our support. But I think he really, I don't know, he got the wrong people around him. He got the wrong advisors. He got the wrong advice. And that he also deviated and aborted the coalition agenda, which could have focused on to make sure that the reforms that were supposed to be done to jumpstart this country will be able to be implemented, so the country will have a good start. And later on, we can come to think of other things, like the car I'm talking about. If you don't fix the engine so the car starts, you cannot think of, how can you think of painting the car?
Now that you mentioned car, President Barrow is fond of calling his government a moving bus. Does this make sense at all for a president, a leader, to be likening a serious business as government to that of a moving bus?
Well, that's his way of describing things. Jama used to call he said the electric broom. Leaders have a way of using adjectives to describe things they want to describe. I think let's not take that let's just take it for what it is, a boss. He's the boss driver, so that he can get people in or out as he wishes. For me, that is not the key, what he says. For me, what is key for me is what he is doing. For me, that is what is important. Is he working? Is he doing enough to make sure? And so far, it's been disappointing insofar as the reforms are concerned. Why is it that still now we have the draconian media laws 3 years into his presidency? Why is it that we could not repeal the Public Order Act? A Public Order Act, in fact, which brought him to power, which played a key role, because why? It was the Public Order Act that led to the death of Solo Sandeng, because Solo Sandeng was calling for media electoral reforms. In fact, the sad thing is that even the thing that Solo Sandeng was electoral reforms is still not been done yet. Now, the Public Order Act is the one that took Honorable Dabo to prison. So why is it that they haven't really done that yet? Why is it that the media laws are still there? The civil service reform is not even started yet. The security sector reform is stalling. I mean, the only thing that we can take with positive is the constitutional reform, which is going smoothly. And according to the CRC, we're expecting a first draft. sometime in a couple of weeks' time. So obviously, there are many missed opportunities. In fact, 2016 was a missed opportunity for the Gambia. And then what happened all of a sudden, these missed opportunities still started coming. So I think he should focus on those things and not the boss or the bus driver. For me, those things are not very important.
So now, one thing also that is out there is the issue of December. December is just around the corner. And the people will have to brace up for an innovating affair. President Barrow wants to continue beyond December, while you have these political forces who say he should step down, he should leave office.
I'll tell you something. The Gambia is in a dilemma, a very serious dilemma, which if we don't really treat it carefully, it will be to the disadvantage of this country and for future generations. For 30 years, we had one government, one president. Subsequently, he was overthrown. 22 years, one party leading, one president. So the norm in terms of our politics and democracy was self-perpetuating rule. Leaders who overstay in power and they are forced out.
Yes.
2016 came. There was a big opportunity for the Gambia that for the first time in the history of this country, we are able to remove a sitting president through the ballot box. It means that now we have an opportunity to reset our democratic culture from self-perpetuating rule to something else, whatever that might be. Now, the coalition MOU was handy in the sense that it wants to reset the political norm to a system where we have multi-party competitive democracy, yes, where leaders don't stay too long in power. Yes. That is why they came up with certain general principles, key among which was what? A person who is elected as flag bearer will oversee a 3-year transition and will resign and conduct elections that he will not contest because he has the advantage of incumbency. Anybody who wins now starts the building of this great nation. Now, but that leader can come back after 5 years to contest the elections. That was the spirit. What are the consequences of that? It will mean that for the first time in our political history, we have a leader who has served not even his whole term and voluntarily resigns. That will reset our democratic culture into something very new. Now, that had failed so far. Yes. The danger is that, like I said, the dilemma, I'll come to the dilemma. Mm-hmm. If Barrow refuses to resign after 3 years, it is setting a bad precedent.
Of course, you said in a recent interview.
Exactly. It will setting a bad precedent to say that we have leaders who make promises and they can't keep promises. It is bad for our democracy. It will undo everything that we fought for. That is one thing. However, if he's forced out through a popular uprising and he's forced out, it is also setting a very bad precedent. It means that it will be, for a very long time in this country, difficult for a president to finish his or her term. Because why? We're also setting it. So
because once people are not happy,
they'll come back. We saw it in Guinea-Bissau, other countries, of course.
Yes,
of course.
They will go out
so now,
to the street.
What do we do as a country? Let us forget about our personal interest and put the interest of the country first. One thing can be done which will solve all these problems is what? For President Barrow to resign. But before he resigns, he appoints a reformist, technocratic vice president who will oversee the rest of the transition period, implement the rest of the reforms, oversee a successful constitutional review and a referendum, organizes elections. All these political leaders, the Hamad Bas, let them all be removed from cabinet. Yes. This president, this reformist president, when Barrow resigns, the vice president becomes the president. So the constitution is not really violated because the reformist vice president becomes the president. And then he can appoint a reformist technocratic cabinet. Let them do the work. Let the politicians, Barrow, go and form his party and come back in 2021. Let everybody go and do their politics and leave these technocrats to run the rest of the 2 years of the transition. Like I said, we missed the opportunity in the first half. We're in the second half. Second half is going to be, this half time will end in January. Second half starts in January. The second half should not be a wasted opportunity. I think that is the only way that can take us out of this quagmire. Then, Barrow will not be disenfranchised. even though he'll resign, but he'll come back to contest in 2021. He wants to form his party. Let him go and form his party and do his work and then come back in 2021. Let all the politicians leave government. Let us get a technocratic, transitional reformist government that will oversee the rest of the transition, who had no political interest to contest in 2021. They'll just make a level playing field and make sure all other parties can come and contest in a free, fair, transparent, democratic election. I think that will take us out of this quagmire.
Well, the good proposition there, but I'm not sure President Barrow will buy into that. Really.
But President Barrow should look at the interest of the country first. We know he wants to, but this is a fair deal for him. If he really believes that he is going to win the 2022 election,
incumbent, he's got the advantage. He's got a little bit of edge.
But let's look at the interest of the country, not his interest. Let's look at the interest of the country. That will take us out of this quagmire. Because otherwise we're in trouble. Like I said, if he states it is bad for our democracy, it is if Barrow resigns and if Barrow appoints a reformist vice president and resigns, believe me, will be the envy of the international community. Barrow will be the envy of the international community. Our international partners, France, Britain, EU, America, they'll respect this small country that really follows democratic values. It will be good for us. It will be good for our democracy. It will set a very good precedent. Nobody will lose in this sense because he will be allowed to run in 2021. He can go and form his party. But what we are trying to avoid is a situation where he comes and self-entrenches, or he uses. I mean, this should be a fresh start for Gambia. And we cannot allow this fresh start to be destroyed by people's personal interests.
But then now what we have also seen is we have a group, a pressure group that wants him to step aside, that is threatening to take to the streets if need be, if necessary, to find a way of getting him out of power. But then you also, this pressure group is facing a lot of challenge from different quarters. You have the one quarter, the quarter of President Adama Barrow, who says, well, what you are doing is illegal. You cannot remove a democratic elected government from power. And you have others who are fence-sitters, who would tell you, other political forces who would tell you, we are not part of Operation 3 Years Jotna. But we also do not have any problem with President Adama Barrow continuing until 2021. And these are all players who are very important in, like, for example, making sure that we jealously guard the democratic dispensation, the desirable one that we want. So what do you think should be the way forward in terms of, you have all given your proposition already, but in terms of the 3 years Jotna, what do you think should be the way forward? Because clearly this stands in front of President Barrow.
Yeah, but like I said, the debate should not be polarized into only two different poles, both speaking with emotions. Let reason and let us have a third voice that takes the debate higher. Now, yes, obviously, the 3 years Jotna guys have a democratic right to peacefully protest, to remind the president of his promises, but not going beyond calling for regime change or removing from power. That would be treason. So they have a right to protest peacefully, to remind the president that as president, you have a right to keep to your word. But that's where it stops. But that also, so if they go beyond that, calling for regime change and taking actions which will really effect regime change, that is dangerous for our democracy because it is setting a bad precedent. We're not allowing a democratically elected president with a 5-year mandate to finish his term. Therefore, it will reset our democratic norm to that that situation. Let's move to the other one. Those who are saying Barrow should do the 5 years, legally, he has the mandate to go for 5 years. But it is also bad for our democracy and setting a bad precedent. That this was the agreement. These were general principles. They voted on these things. The world is watching. I think the world now will know whether this country is a country that has leaders who keep their promises. If Barrow fails to keep his promise and goes for the 5 years, it is also setting a very bad democratic precedent for this country. It's not, so both are not ideal. Both debates are not, in my view, they are not ideal. Yes, calling for regime change, effecting it, taking action is not ideal for me. Barrow going for the rest of the time is not ideal. There must be a third way. That is why, if you remember way back we spoke, I said let us call for a dialogue. Let us sit as a nation, as a country, and look for a way out of this quagmire. there are people who can come with different ideas in terms of how do we really solve this situation, whereby we will not jeopardize the interest of this country, jeopardize our drive to building a country that is based on the principles of democracy. Otherwise, it cannot go. We have a very fragile democracy, which was midwifed by the coalition partners. This democracy was born with complications during the impasse, anemic. It must be nurtured with care. We must be very, very careful how we deal with it, because the slightest mistake by one politician based on his or her personal interest can jeopardize and reverse everything and take us back to the dark days.
And now, again, still on the 3 years Jotna movement, this is a movement that, I mean, they've made up their mind to find a way of, I mean, just about removing President Barrow from office in December or in January, whichever month that is. But then what we have also seen, or not seen, is the issue of political parties engaging this movement. What we have seen is that these some political parties would come out and say, not in our name. We are not part of it. We do not have any problem with them taking to the streets, but we are not part of it. Is that a way, or is that even possible for like these political parties to engage this pressure group as a way of finding a way of knowing what really is their problem and finding a way forward?
That's the dialogue I'm talking about.
Yes.
I think by now, you know, when I told the UN 2017 that this is a problem brewing, that we should solve it at that time, they took the message up, but nothing happened. Now is the time for us to sit, have a round table. All political parties, the president's camp, and also the 3A Jotna guys. Let them sit and look at the way forward. They didn't engage. I think engagement is needed here. Engagement is needed. They need to engage each other, because if anger and emotions are the ones that are driving this agenda, it's surely going to fail, and it surely will have serious, far-reaching implications for this country. And we don't want that, because I mean the slightest mistake can trigger something that will be uncontrollable, and we don't want that. So therefore, I think now is the time for us to engage each other. Now is the time for us to dialogue. Now is the time for us to listen more to each other than just be talking. Because once we start talking and there's a lot of noise, reason is lost in this whole ember of noise. Therefore, now it's time for us to listen to each other. Let us dialogue. Let us talk as a country. This is our country. I mean, it's our children. What do we leave behind for the next generation of Gambians who are coming? A destroyed country? A country with nothing for them to find here? A country where they cannot live in dignity? A country where they cannot access basic quality relevant education? A country where they cannot access basic quality health care? A country where there is no infrastructure? A country where there is nothing for them to be able to develop their potentials and their skills and their talents? We don't want to leave that country behind. We want to live a country where every Gambian that comes can live in dignity. Every Gambian that comes to this country can have access to the basics. Will not go to bed hungry. Will not have your parents putting you in the back begging at Petrogas at night. A country where there is infrastructure connecting communities. A country where our pensioners, our old people live in dignity and die in dignity. That is a country we have to leave behind, so our children can be proud of the generation that left. But if we really destroy this country, one thing that we cannot take away from the previous generation, we can say they never built skyscrapers. They did not build the country. They did not build roads. But they left one thing with us: peace. Especially peaceful coexistence. The previous generation left that with us. We found that. Let us build on this and make sure we go beyond and build a country that is based on democratic principles and ideals, respect for human rights, that promote diversity and peaceful coexistence, and a country where each and every Gambian, even non-Gambians, can live in dignity.
What did you make of the UDP's last week position stance?
Well,
like to say President Barrow should stick to 3 years. What did you make of that?
Like I said, I wasn't again surprised. I saw it coming because there was some delay in them coming out, and partly that delay made me have the hunch that UDP will take a very pragmatic position in this, in the sense that UDP is a political party with its own interest. UDP is a political party with its own internal dynamics, which is playing within the UDP. What we see is the UDP from outside, but there are internal dynamics playing within UDP. UDP is not a It's not. It doesn't speak with one voice. There are voices within UDP. Obviously, at that time, like I said at the Gizgis show, that interests, even though the national interest should be key, but parties have interest. It was at their interest at that time to back Barrow 100%.
Even for 5 years?
Equivocally, obviously. You cannot, I mean, that's it. I mean, even me and you, when we are friends, sometimes we don't even tell each other the truth. I'll back you even if you are wrong. Unequivocally, they'll back the UDP Barrow at that time. But now things are not the same. They have to take an independent position. That will be in the interest of the party.
But is that normal at all? Is that normal for a politician or for a political grouping to be speaking from both sides of the mouth? Is
what
that
do you
normal?
I mean, I'll tell you.
Speaking from both sides of your mouth.
I'll tell you something. You know what is not normal? What is not normal is you not accepting that what you said was like your weakness. Not accepting that, okay, it was a mistake. Fine. But it's normal for people to change their mind. Nothing is wrong with that. We've seen it every day. We've seen it everywhere. We've seen it even in European politics. People change their mind. With new information, with changing circumstances, you change your mind. That happens everywhere. This is not, it's not the first time. It has happened. I'm not saying that it is right. What I'm saying is that people change their mind. It's not the first time. It's not unique. It's not like it's the end of the world. Yes, we were with Barrow. We supported his agenda. His agenda was 5 years. We supported that agenda. Now we're not with him anymore. We are supporting our own agenda. Our agenda now is for him to go after 3 years. So what? For me, let us not focus on whether they are changing what. Let's look at the implications of these changes for our democracy, for the trajectory of this country, for the party itself. But people have a change right for Barrow himself, didn't he say I was going for 3 years?
Yes.
What did he say later? I'm going for 5 years. So obviously, even though I'm not saying that that's what politicians should engage in, because politicians will be consistent. It's difficult to be consistent, especially with a political environment which changes very quickly, overnight. Every minute there are changes, so it's difficult to really change. How many politicians have said and unsaid things in this country? So obviously, these things happen. This is part of our politics now, but again, there's nothing we can do about it. UDP has a right to have a position, whichever position they think is in the interest of the UDP.
Now, Doc, let's talk about the Gambian, the way the Gambian perceive and take politics to be. Just not in Gambia, but in Africa, a lot of people, support politicians or political leaders or political parties based on certain principles of tribe, principles of region, principles of, and you made an interesting argument just last week on Gizgis saying now Gambian people, especially the young people, have started to realize that that's not the way to go. They've started now looking at the personality, at the competence and the qualification of the political leader. But do you really think that that is how Gambians are seeing politics? If you look at our political parties, what you see, people tend to lean on a certain party based on, well, we are from the same tribe, or well, we are from the same region.
That is changing, and it will change for good. That is why I was very happy that DOI has set a precedent by coming up with a political blueprint, a political framework they call Gonga. I think now it's time for us to move away from the politics of personality. And I'll tell you something, in political science, when it comes to political party support, the basis of political party support, or what they call psephology or behavioral politics, why do people support a particular political party? One of the theories proposed is what they call the party identification model. That is, people support a particular party because they identify themselves with the party. In what sense? That if it's a gender party, women identify themselves when they vote for, they support that party. Do you understand? If it's a workers' party, workers identify. But we also have what they call the sociological model, which says what? People identify themselves with a party and support that party because of certain links like ethnicity and family. Because my father and my grandfather are for NRP, therefore I am also NRP. Because my tribe is from this place, because my father, so that is the ethnicity base. But people are becoming more rational choice thinkers now. And these are short-term decisions. These are rational choice thinkers. That is, the decision is based on no rational choice. Today, as a primary school teacher, If Barrow comes up with a sound economic policy, even 6 months before elections, whereby inflation is dropped to accepted levels.
Minimum, yeah.
The price of rice has gone down to $600. My salary is increased and I have extra money in my pocket. Do you think I'll go and vote for somebody because of where tribes? People, these are short-term choices. It has to do with, one, the economy is important. How is economic before election? Two, the individual. Who is the leader of that party? Three, also the media. So all these things are happening and Gambians are changing. You have to understand the demographic dynamic also is changing. I'm not saying that this change will be perfected in 2021, but before 2026 to 2032, the more we go, the more younger Gambians are coming up to vote, the more young Gambians are aware, and the more our politics will change. And I'll tell you something, that people are saying, some people are arguing that Gambians are going to vote along ethnic lines. I say no. Instead, what we will see in the next elections is mostly on regional lines. Why? The ethnicity is the broad one, but the regions are below the ethnicities. Now, if we have one political an election where we have 3 different political leaders who come from the same ethnic group, what will people vote is based on region? CRR, West Coast, and so on and so forth. Yes. So obvious these things will change and they will be diluted. So obvious these things are, so that is why I said nobody can use what happened in the APPP and APIs as a benchmark to be able to predict or to be able to analyze the elections that are coming. Things will change, young people are coming to vote, people are more aware now. The media has exposed Gambians so badly that now any politician who will use the ethnic card to win elections, you are fooling yourself.
And President Barrow, sometimes he would call himself a wrestler. He's expected to form his own political party. And he should also just about be in the race when his party gets formed. What are the prospects? What does the future hold for him? Do you think he stands any chance?
One thing that we can for sure establish is that President Barrow is the most unpopular president in the history of this country as we speak now. There were a time when his premium was very high at that time when he just came to power. Yes. But now it has really, his approval ratings have dropped. It's up to, of course, it's up to him now to see what can be done. And every day he makes silly mistakes that makes his ratings to drop. And we see it on a daily basis. But like I said, he still have a chance to save himself. That is one. One of the key things that can be used against President Barrow in a possible campaign is his integrity. If he doesn't resign, that is going to be a key talking point, that the man lacks integrity. You see, you don't trust him, you don't fulfill promises, because he has already shown that by not fulfilling the MOU promise. That is why if he is able to appoint a reformist technocratic vice president who is a Gambian with international experience, who has integrity, who understands complex transition systems, able to do that transition, and resigns, that will give President Barrow a plus. He can say, you know what? I made a promise, I led the coalition, I did the 3 years, I removed Jammeh, I resigned. That will make people to understand this is a man who has integrity. So now we cannot use that, nobody can use that against him. So that even gives something to him. But if he doesn't, then that's going to be key. But like I said, 2021 is going to be very interesting elections. It's going to be the most interesting elections ever. But again, the semi-finals will be the referendum. The referendum will really be one where it will start, and the finals will be the 2020 elections. But the referendum is where it starts, because if the referendum is going to be very interesting, especially if key players are divided in certain questions in the constitution and they take opposing positions, and you come to see how people will be voting, not based on what the constitution is saying, but based on who is supporting the and that's where it starts. That's where it's like a test. That is the test. That is a mock test before we go to the final exams.
Dr. Ismail Ceesay, well, I'm afraid we'll have to end it there for this interview, but thank you very much again for your time. Thank you. That's Dr. Ismail Ceesay there. We will end this today's program here. We will be back tomorrow. Until then, my name is Lamin Jai. Thank you.
Can we go?
Dr. Ismail Ceesay, well, I'm afraid we'll have to end it there for this interview, but thank you very much again. That's Dr. Ismail Ceesay there. We will end this today's program here. We will be back tomorrow. Until then, my name is Lamin Jai. Thank you.